Good morning, friends. Welcome to the worship of the First Church of the Brethren in San Diego. We also know ourselves as the Oasis for Peace. We are a faith community that's deeply rooted in the Anabaptist tradition. We believe that Jesus is the center of our faith, community is the center of our life, and reconciliation is the center of our work. And we embody these values and live these values as we work for social justice, as we develop ourselves as disciples, and as we provide hospitality for those we encounter. Our faith community embodies multi-voiced worship, and we believe in the priesthood of all believers. We find our home here on the Peace Campus at 3850 West Gate Place in the Fairmont Park neighborhood of San Diego. You're invited to come and worship with us online, and when the shelter-in-place thing is all over, feel free to come join us for worship on Sunday morning at 10:15. We have created our sacred space. We have acknowledged that God is among us, and Jesus is accompanying us on our journey. So feel free to rest your eyes on our worship center or on the worship center that you've created at home. Feel the peace of God in this moment. Accept God's presence with you. Be still. Clear your mind of all of the busyness, of all the challenge, of all the worry, of all the anxiety, if that's even possible, but attempt to. And allow yourself to know that God is God, and God is here with us for worship. As I continue to live into the physical isolation that we've been asked to provide for ourselves as well as for the safety of others, I'm realizing that I miss that social connection. So I've been calling people, talking to my family on Facebook, and trying to find ways to connect socially, even though I'm physically isolated. One of the things that we believe is that we're a community called by Christ to be in the world, to connect with one another. So as a time for sharing our voices of love, I wonder who you might have connected with last week, who you might have called on the telephone or shared time on FaceTime. And I wonder who you might be able to do that again with this week. Each week we gather here and we look into each other's eyes, and we share each other's handshakes and hugs and fist bumps. And those are voices of love. So right now I'm going to ask you to think about who you want to connect with this week, who you want to share your voice of love with. Is it someone who might be shut in from our congregation? Is it a part of our phone care system that the deacons have put together? Is it just sending a postcard, shooting off a text, sending an email, reconnecting with someone you haven't connected with in, I don't know, years? Or is it just to look across the couch or across the room and look at someone and say, I love you, or share a virtual hug? Think about how you might be a voice of love this week. Take a moment, shut the video down if you'd like, write a couple of names, and then commit to yourself as a disciple of Christ to connect in love, sharing your voice of love with those people on your list. Connecting with God is so important in this time of constant change. As I was talking with one of my colleagues this week, I found myself talking about groundedness and rootedness, and where I find groundedness and rootedness in a time where everything's changing. Every time you see a news story or talk to somebody else, something else has changed. Those moments of rooted and groundedness for me this week have come in short spurts. You know, spurts where you are overwhelmed and all of a sudden you just step back a minute. And it's come for me in a breath, recognizing that I need to just stop, step away, and breathe in the peace of God and breathe out the knowledge that God is always with me. We share a lot of joys and concerns and gratitudes and challenges when we're together. We're not able to do that and to be grounded in the knowledge that we can see each other and share those in person, but we can be grounded in the knowledge that we share prayers together and gratitudes and challenges, and those can be shared online at the email entitled gratitudesandchallenges@gmail.com. And that's a place where you can share a gratitude, you can share a challenge. And then on Tuesday morning, Oren, our staff that's in working on Tuesday morning, will take those gratitudes and challenges and share them with the congregation so that you can continue to be in prayer for one another and feel grounded and rooted in the support of each other. As we move into a time of connecting with God, we often do it through music, through silence, and through spoken prayer. So as we come, we're going to take a moment to listen to Susan Sanner, our music director in music. Then we're going to have a time of silence so that you can offer your own prayers to God. And then I will close with a spoken prayer. As we move into the time, I invite you to practice with me a breath prayer, the ancient tradition of breathing and connecting with yourself. It's a conscious way to partner with God, to be present. And it's also, you know, the science is also there as well, as with a deep breath and taking it in and a letting it out. It also has a tendency to just kind of relax you. So I invite you to this time of breath prayer. I'm going to invite you to the phrase, peace of God, be alive in my life. So as we come to prayer, we'll do 3 breaths together. 1, breathing in the peace of God, and 2, breathing out the life, being alive in my life. So it'll look like this. Breathe in, peace of God. Be alive in my life. So I invite you to share with me in that for 3 breaths. And then Susan will share with us in music. And perhaps as you listen, you can continue that breath prayer, taking in the grace and peace of God and breathing out the life and recognizing God's life with you. Let's join together. Peace of God, be alive in my life. Peace of God, be alive in my life. Peace of God, be alive in my life.
Just live from day to day. I don't borrow
Let us pray. God of all that is changing, in this time of upheaval, we desire something solid in which to ground ourselves. In this time of sheltering in place, we seek a place, a space that can be a safe haven. In this time of growing menace, we look to flatten the curve with physical isolation and social encounter. In this time of contradiction, we attempt to merge faith and science, trusting in God and knowing that science is real. In this time of fear and anxiety, we look to find a constant presence, God of healing and wholeness, in those moments when it feels like you are so far away from us, perhaps even hiding your face, and our faith threatens to disintegrate and our fears win out. Bring to our minds your presence. Bring to our minds the stories of our life where you have been present and worked and saved us, when you have provided a way through the challenges. Bring to our minds stories of courage and strength, of journey and accompaniment, of exile and Passover, and diaspora and coming home, sickness and healing, death and resurrection. In the quiet mystery of your presence, provide the hope to be fully who we are, even in moments of being fully of who we are not. Allow us the confidence to walk this Lenten season with the chrysalis of transformation, not knowing where we are going or what we may come, but fully resting in the faith that whatever and wherever we find ourselves, you are holding us in the arms of your love. May this be so, O God. Amen. Throughout the Lenten season, we've been studying the Gospel of Mark. So hear these words from the Gospel of Mark, beginning at verse 1, continuing to 8, and then from 24 on to 37. As Jesus left the temple later that day, one of the disciples noticed the grandeur of Herod's temple. The disciple said, "Teacher, I can't believe the size of these stones. Look at these magnificent buildings." Jesus looked closely at the magnificent buildings and said, "Someday there won't be one of these great stones left on another. Everything will be thrown down." They took a seat on the Mount of Olives across the valley from the temple, and Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked Jesus to explain his statement to them privately. They said, "Don't keep us in the dark. What will the temple be destroyed? What sign will let us know that things are about to happen?" And Jesus said, "Take care that no one deceives you. Many will come claiming to be mine, saying, 'I am the one,' and they will fool lots of people. You will hear of wars or that war is coming, but don't lose heart. These things will have to happen, although it won't mean the end yet. Tribe will rise up against tribe, nation against nation, and there will be earthquakes in place after place and famines. These are a prelude to labor pains that precede the temple's fall. As Isaiah said, in the days after that great suffering, the sun will refuse to shine, and the moon will hold back its light. The stars in heaven will fall, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then you will see, as Daniel predicted, the Son of Man coming in the clouds clothed in power and majesty. And he will send out his heavenly messengers and gather together to himself those he has chosen from the four corners of the world, from every direction and every land. Jesus said, "Learn from this lesson of the fig tree. When its branches new and tender and begins to put forth leaves, you know that summer must be near. In the same way, when you see and hear the things I described to you taking place, you'll know the time is drawing near. It's true, this generation will not pass away before all these things have happened. Heaven and earth may pass away, but these words of mine will never pass away. Take heed, for no one knows the day or the hour when the end is coming. The messengers in heaven don't even know, nor does the Son, only the Father. So be alert, watch for it, and pray, for you never know when the time might approach. This situation is like a man who went on a journey. When he departed, he left his servants in charge of the house. Each of them had his own job to do, and the man left the porter to stand at the door watching. So stay awake, because no one knows when the master of the house is coming back. It could be in the evening, or at midnight, or when the rooster crows in the morning. Stay awake, be alert, so that when he suddenly returns, the master won't find you sleeping. The teaching I am giving the four of you is for everyone who will follow me. Stay awake and keep your eyes open." Gotta be honest, when I read that scripture, I thought to myself, really? What does this have to do with this apocalyptic, fear-filled wondering of what's going to happen and when the temple's going to fall and what that means for them in their lives? I had to wonder, what does that have to do with us today? And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, what better text to think about as we experience perhaps a lot of the same emotions that the disciples were experiencing. Fear, anxiety, not knowing the future, knowing that they were heading toward Jerusalem, which is a hot spot of terror and fear and anxiety for Jews at that particular point in time. And I felt like I could identify with these guys. I could understand from a different perspective as we move through this season of Lent with the fear and anxiety that I'm experiencing. And I wondered about the grounding, and I wondered about what sustained them as they continued that walk and as they thought about what could happen if it is the end. And while we're not looking at apocalyptic, perhaps the end of the world, this is not Stephen King's Stand, it is a time for us to look into the fear and anxieties that we have and where our faith grounds us, where our faith gives us strength, where our faith connects us with Jesus. And I had to think about stories, right? That's what the Bible is all about. It's biblical stories that give a community a sense of strength and courage, looking to Jesus and seeing how Jesus dealt with things and seeing how the disciples followed and what kind of learnings are there for us. So I began to think about, where is the hope? Where do you find grounding when you're in the midst of constant change? And I had to think about Rachel Held Evans and her stories of origin and her writings about origin stories and how origin stories ground us when all things else seem anxious and confused and constantly changing. So I thought, what are the grounding stories that we have? And I thought of, the origin stories of our faith. And I thought of the Jesus story that we're living into right now in Lent. And I wondered, what are our grounding stories? This time of year, we think about the Passover. We think about the story of the Egyptians and Pharaoh and Moses's "let my people go." We think of the blood on the door frames, and God passing over because of the faithfulness of the people and the obedience of the people. And we think about the freedom that comes in obedience and listening to the directions of God. And we think about the movement of the people out of Egypt and across the Red Sea, and that sense of salvation, that sense of freedom that comes in leaving behind that which is terrorizing and moving into the unknown. It doesn't go all well, maybe perhaps in the future, but at that point, and there's a remembrance of the freedom. So as we come together in this time, remembering Jesus, remembering our faith, remembering our stories, I invite you to write, get your journal, get your pen, and write a story that provides you an understanding of safety and grounding. A story that reminds you of Jesus' constant care, or a story that grounds you in God's love and God's continued accompaniment. And if you have a couple of people in your house, you might want to just stop the video and share a story with each other that grounds you, and recognize how that story does ground you, and that it could be one of your faith stories that you continue to draw from and move back to when you hit those periods of anxiety, or you need to do that breath prayer, breathing in the peace of God and allowing it to come to life in your life. So take some time now to think about stories, to share stories, to write stories, to find your grounding in the stories of faith, in the stories of your life in the past that can give you hope for the future. As we close our time together today, I invite you to remember throughout the week the stories that you have shared today. I invite you to remember the groundedness that you have in your faith. And I invite you to live that groundedness, that rootedness that you have in Jesus throughout the week. Let Jesus walk with you, reminding you of his presence through the stories that you hear and those in which you participate. May the peace of God go with you now and throughout the week. Thinking of you, praying for you. God's blessing.